The cable ties cut into my wrists, plastic teeth biting deeper every time the van hit a pothole, and all I could think was, Mom's radiation appointment is at 3. The absurdity of worrying about a medical appointment while being kidnapped struck me even through my terror, even through the black hood that smelled like motor oil and something chemical. Chloroform, maybe, from whatever they'd pressed over my mouth in the CVS parking lot. I'd just finished my shift at the pharmacy, was still wearing my name tag for God's sake, heading to catch the bus to my second job waitressing, when hands grabbed me from behind. I remembered the scuffed white van, the arms that locked around my chest like iron bands, the cloth over my nose and mouth, sickeningly sweet. Then nothing until I woke here, zip-tied and hooded, listening to men argue in rapid Italian. My Italian was limited to menu items from the restaurant where I worked. Carbonara, panna cotta, ciao bella, but I caught one word repeated over and over, getting louder each time. Spagliato. Wrong. They kept saying something was wrong. One voice rose above the others, young and panicked. La ragazza spagliata. Boss is going to kill us. This is the wrong girl. Another voice, older and calmer, responded in English. Same height, same hair, same damn neighborhood. How are we supposed to? Castellano's daughter has a tattoo, the first voice insisted. A rose, on her wrist. Check her wrist. Rough hands grabbed my arm, yanking up the sleeve of my CVS polo. I had no tattoos, couldn't afford them, even if I wanted them, and my mother would have had a fit anyway, calling them marks of foolishness. In that way she had of making even small rebellions feel like betrayals of everything she'd sacrificed. Murda, someone swore, and the van filled with the kind of silence that meant people were deciding whether you lived or died. The van jerked to a stop, car doors opened. Cold night air rushed in, carrying the smell of pine trees and damp earth. Definitely not Queens anymore. Rough hands dragged me out onto gravel that crunched under my worn sneakers, then across smooth marble that felt expensive even through rubber soles. The hood was ripped off. I blinked against sudden, brutal brightness. A chandelier hung above me, all crystal and gold, throwing light across an entryway that looked like something from a movie, the kind where people got murdered in beautiful places. Marble floors stretched toward a sweeping staircase. Oil paintings in gilded frames lined the walls. This wasn't just wealth. This was old wealth, the kind that made my entire existence feel like a mistake. And standing in the center of it all was a man who made my breath catch in my throat for entirely different reasons than fear. He looked like he'd stepped out of one of those Renaissance paintings my art history professor used to project on the lecture hall screen. Sharp cheekbones that could cut glass, dark eyes that assessed me with the kind of intensity that made you feel naked even fully clothed, black hair swept back from a face all angles and shadows. He wore a suit that looked like it had been tailored straight onto his skin, expensive enough to make her student loans weep. Tattoos crawled up from his collar and down his forearms. Intricate, expensive ink that told stories I couldn't read. He was, objectively, the most beautiful man I'd ever seen. He was also, clearly, extremely dangerous. "You're not her," he said in lightly accented English. Not a question, an accusation. I forced my voice steady despite the hammering of my heart, despite the zip-tie welts throbbing on my wrists, despite every instinct screaming at me to run. Growing up where I did taught you one thing: never show fear. Fear was blood in the water. "I don't know who you think I am," I said, lifting my chin, "but I'm nobody. I work at CVS and Sal's Italian kitchen. There's been a mistake." "Yes," the man agreed, stepping closer with the fluid grace of a predator. His eyes traced my face, my brown skin, my natural curls pulled back in a practical bun for work, the CVS name tag still pinned crooked on my chest. "There has been. A costly one." Behind him, 3 men in tactical gear shifted uncomfortably. The youngest one, maybe mid-20s, with nervous energy and a fading bruise on his jaw, spoke rapidly in Italian. The man in the suit held up one hand without breaking eye contact with me, and the room went silent. That kind of power, the kind that didn't need volume, was more terrifying than any weapon. "My name is Clito Farina," he said, like he was introducing himself at some elegant dinner party instead of a kidnapping. "And you, unfortunately, are not Rosa Castellano, which presents us both with a problem." My stomach dropped. Castellano. I knew that name. Everyone in my neighborhood knew that name. Vincent Castellano owned half the legitimate businesses, and, if the whispers were true, all the illegitimate ones. The restaurant where I worked was his. The bodega where I bought groceries was his. You learned to look the other way, to never ask questions, to pretend you didn't see certain cars parked in certain places at certain times. And Rosa Castellano. I'd seen her a handful of times at the restaurant when she came to meet her father. Beautiful girl, mixed race like me, with brown skin and curls that looked professionally maintained in a way mine never would. We'd been mistaken for each other once before, actually, by a delivery driver who'd called her by my name. The memory felt sickeningly ironic now. I don't know anything about. I started. I believe you, Cleto interrupted, his voice carrying the weight of a judge pronouncing sentence. You have the unfortunate luck of resembling someone you're not, and the worse luck of being in the wrong parking lot at the wrong time. My men were careless. Sloppy. He glanced at the men behind him, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. They saw a young black woman with curls and brown skin in the target neighborhood, and assumed. Assumptions, he said, each word sharp as a blade, are how people die. The casual way he discussed death. My potential death. Sent ice through my veins. But I'd learned young that predators could smell fear, that showing weakness invited violence. So I met his eyes and said, "You could let me go. I don't know you." I couldn't identify anyone. They wore masks. I wouldn't tell anyone anything because nobody would believe a girl from my neighborhood anyway. I just need to get to my mom's radiation appointment. Something flickered across Cleto Farina's face. So fast I almost missed it. Surprise? Interest? Something almost human beneath the cold mask. "Your mother is ill?" he asked, and for the first time, his voice carried something other than ice. "Brain cancer. Stage 4. Today's treatment 17 of 35. The words tumbled out before I could stop them, desperation cracking through my careful composure. She thinks I'm at work. If I don't show up, if I don't call, she'll panic and stress. Stress is bad for her treatment outcomes. It compromises her immune system. Enzo, Cleto said sharply. The nervous young man stepped forward. "Boss?" Cleto's eyes never left mine. "Have someone call Jamaica Hospital Medical Center. Oncology Department. Confirm appointment for Grace Jones and ensure she has transportation." My heart stuttered. Was this mercy? Or was he gathering information to use against me later? I couldn't tell, and that uncertainty was more terrifying than straightforward cruelty. "I can't release you," Cleto said quietly, stepping close enough that I could smell his cologne, cedar, and something darker, expensive, and foreign. "You've seen my face, my home, my men's faces. Even with masks, there are other identifying factors. Voices, builds, mannerisms, and Vincent Castellano." His jaw tightened, and for just a moment I saw something raw beneath the controlled exterior. Hatred. Deep, personal, burning hatred. Castellano is a man I cannot afford to underestimate. If he learns we targeted his daughter and caught the wrong girl, he gains advantage. Information. Leverage. But if he believes I have his daughter, or that I might harm an innocent because of my error, he may be motivated to return what he's stolen from me. The pieces clicked together in my mind, each one more horrifying than the last. "So I'm bait," I said, my voice hardening despite my fear. "For something I have absolutely nothing to do with, because your men can't tell black girls apart." Cleto's eyes narrowed, but he didn't deny it, didn't make excuses. "My men made assumptions based on incomplete intelligence and poor lighting. They saw similar features. Your skin tone, your hair texture, your build, and in the right circumstances, you could be mistaken for Rosa Castellano, from a distance, in dim light. The resemblance is there." "That's not how this works," I said, anger cutting through the terror now. "We're not interchangeable just because we're both." "I know that," Cleto interrupted, something sharp entering his tone that might have been genuine offense. "Which is precisely why you're standing here instead of dead in that parking lot, which would be the clean solution to this problem. You are Rose Jones, not Rosa Castellano. You work 2 jobs to support your dying mother. You're pursuing a degree. You've done nothing. Absolutely nothing. to deserve this. His voice dropped lower, became almost gentle, which somehow made the next words more devastating. But deserve has nothing to do with it. You're collateral, Miss Jones. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong face. And I apologize for the inconvenience, but you belong to me now, until I decide otherwise. He gestured toward the staircase with one elegant hand, like he was inviting me to dinner instead of captivity. Maria will show you to your room. You'll find everything you need. Clothes, toiletries, anything to make you comfortable. We're not barbarians. His smile was cold, beautiful, terrifying. You may be here for a while. I suggest you make peace with that. The older woman who appeared at his words looked kind. Gray hair pulled into a neat bun, soft eyes, the sort of face that belonged to someone's grandmother. The cognitive dissonance of it, this maternal woman working for a man who kidnapped people, made my head spin. This way, dear, Maria said gently, like she was leading me to a guest room instead of a gilded cage. I looked back at Cleto Farina one last time. He stood beneath that crystal chandelier, surrounded by wealth and art and violence, watching me with those dark, unreadable eyes. A man who looked like a Renaissance prince and acted like the devil himself. My mother, I said, my voice breaking despite my best efforts. Please, whatever else happens, don't hurt my mother. For just a moment. So brief I might have imagined it. Something almost like regret crossed Cleto Farina's face. Your mother's treatment will continue uninterrupted, he said. You have my word, the word of a kidnapper, I whispered. Yes, he agreed simply. But it's all you have. And I have never broken my word. Remember that, Rose Jones. It may be the only thing that keeps you sane. Welcome back, my beautiful souls and kindred spirits. Before we start, go ahead and subscribe, like, and share where you're watching from. It always warms my heart to see our little storytelling family stretch across the world. Every click, every comment, every bit of love you give helps us keep uncovering these unforgettable stories together. So find your quiet place, settle in, and let me take you somewhere you've never been before. The bedroom they locked her in was nicer than any place Rose had ever lived, which somehow made it worse. A king bed dominated the space, draped in what had to be Egyptian cotton, sheets so smooth they felt like water against her fingertips when she touched them tentatively, as if luxury itself might burn. The bathroom was all marble and gold fixtures, the kind she'd only seen in magazine spreads left behind in the CVS break room. Thick towels hung on heated racks. Designer toiletries lined glass shelves, their French labels indecipherable but expensive. Prison shouldn't smell like lavender and vanilla. Shouldn't feel like silk. Rose cataloged everything with the practiced eye of someone who'd learned young that survival meant noticing details others missed. The windows, floor to ceiling, offering views of manicured gardens and distant trees, were reinforced glass. She could see the subtle crosshatch pattern when light hit them at certain angles. Bulletproof, probably. Definitely escape-proof. Decorative iron bars disguised as artistic metalwork bracketed the exterior. Beautiful cages were still cages. The cameras were harder to spot, but she found them. One in the crown molding above the bed, another angled toward the bathroom door, a third positioned to capture the window. Someone was always watching. The thought made her skin crawl, made her hyper-aware of every movement, every breath. She tried the windows anyway because giving up without trying felt like dying before you were dead. Locked, as expected. The bathroom had a ventilation grate, but even if she could remove the screws with, her fingernails? The opening was barely wide enough for her arm, let alone her body. No weapons, no escape routes. Nothing but expensive emptiness and the weight of her own trapped heartbeat. Rose sat on the edge of the bed, careful, as if she didn't deserve to fully occupy the space, and allowed herself exactly 5 minutes. 5 minutes to press her palms against her eyes and feel the terror she'd been holding back since the CVS parking lot. 5 minutes to let her shoulders shake, to taste salt on her lips, to imagine her mother alone at Jamaica Hospital wondering why her daughter hadn't called. Then she forced herself to breathe, forced her hands to stop trembling, forced the tears back down her throat where they belonged because crying never fixed anything. Her mother had taught her that, working 3 jobs and never once complaining, never once breaking down where Rose could see. Survive first, process later. She was washing her face in that obscenely beautiful bathroom, water cold against her overheated skin, when she heard the lock click. Rose's reflection in the mirror showed her fear. Wide, dark eyes, brown skin gone ashen, natural curls falling loose from her work bun before she could mask it. She straightened, lifted her chin, tried to look like someone who wasn't terrified. The woman who entered carried a breakfast tray and the kind of maternal warmth that felt deeply wrong in this situation. Maria, Cleto had called her. Gray hair pulled into a neat bun, soft lines around kind eyes, the sort of face that belonged in a kitchen baking cookies for grandchildren, not serving meals to kidnapping victims. Good morning, dear. Maria's accent was Italian but softened by years in America. She set the tray on a small table near the window. Fresh fruit, pastries that smelled like butter in heaven, coffee in a delicate porcelain cup. You should eat. Keep your strength up. Rose's stomach growled traitorously. She hadn't eaten since her lunch break yesterday. Was it only yesterday? Time felt strange, elastic, and compressed all at once. I'm not hungry. The lie tasted bitter. Maria's smile was patient, knowing. Your body doesn't care about pride. Eat. How can you work for him? The question burst out before Rose could stop it. How can you work for someone who kidnaps innocent people? Who holds them prisoner? Something flickered across Maria's face. Not quite guilt, but close. She smoothed the bedspread unnecessarily, her hands needing occupation. I've worked for the Farina family for 20 years. Since Mr. Cleto was a boy. I watched his father die, watched him become what he is now. Her voice dropped lower, intimate and sad. In this world, nobody is innocent, Kara. Everybody survives however they can. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. Maria moved toward the door, then paused with her hand on the frame. The boss, he keeps his word. Always. Every promise, every threat. He means them. Remember this. It will help you understand how to survive him. The lock clicked behind her, that small sound of captivity that Rose was learning to hate more than anything. She stared at the breakfast tray, her stomach cramped with hunger. Her pride insisted she leave it untouched, refused to accept anything from her captors. But pride didn't keep you alive. Pride didn't save your mother. Rose ate the fruit first. Strawberries and melon that tasted too good, too fresh, wrong in their perfection. Then a pastry that melted on her tongue, butter and sugar and shame. She was finishing the coffee when the lock clicked again. This time it was Enzo, the nervous young man from the kidnapping, though he looked less nervous now. Cold, calculating. A photographer followed him, some wiry guy with professional equipment and the dead eyes of someone who'd learned not to ask questions. Boss wants proof of life photos, Enzo said without preamble. You'll cooperate. Rose set down the coffee cup carefully. And what if I don't? Enzo's smile was cruel. Boss said voluntary cooperation preferred, but your mother has treatment Thursday, yes? Would be terrible shame if hospital suddenly lost funding for experimental program. These things happen. Budgets cut, donations disappear. Very sad. The threat landed like a fist to her solar plexus. Rose felt the air leave her lungs, felt the careful control she'd built start to crack. They knew exactly where to press, exactly what leverage would work. Her mother's life for her cooperation. Not a choice. Never really a choice. Fine. The word tasted like surrender. Tell me what you want. The photographer positioned her by the window, afternoon light painting her brown skin golden, making the prison look like paradise. He directed her with professional detachment. Turn here, chin up, eyes forward. Look frightened but unharmed, defiant but controlled. Each click of the camera shutter felt like pieces of her dignity being stolen, archived, weaponized. Perfect, the photographer murmured. You photograph beautifully, such pain in the eyes. Rose wanted to claw his eyes out. Instead, she stood still and let them take their pictures and hated herself for cooperating, for being so easy to manipulate. When they finally left, she was alone again with her rage and her helplessness and the growing certainty that she'd do whatever they asked because the alternative, her mother dying, was unthinkable. Hours passed. The light shifted from afternoon gold to evening amber. Rose paced the cage, measured it in steps, 15 from window to door, 8 from bed to bathroom. Like knowing its dimensions might somehow make it smaller, more manageable. She was sitting on the floor with her back against the bed, knees pulled to chest, when the lock clicked one more time. Cleto Farina entered carrying a dinner tray himself, which surprised her enough that she forgot to school her expression. He wore different clothes. Black slacks and a charcoal sweater that looked expensive enough to cover a semester's tuition. But the same controlled elegance, the same predatory grace. "You haven't eaten since breakfast." Not a question, statement of fact. He knew everything, apparently. Starving yourself helps no one, least of all your mother. The mention of her mother sent fresh rage through Rose's veins. "Don't talk about her. You don't get to use her name." Cleto set the tray down, the scent of pasta and herbs filling the room. "She's the only reason you're cooperating. Of course I'm going to talk about her." He settled into the chair across from her with fluid ease, all sharp angles and contained power. "Eat, Rose. We need to discuss the plan." "What plan? The one where you use me as bait because your men can't tell black women apart?" His jaw tightened fractionally. The first crack in his composure. "The plan where I recover what Vincent Castellano stole from my family. $3 million he took through fraud and murder. Money he owes. Your leverage to get it back." "I'm not Rosa Castellano." "No, but in photographs, with the right angles, you could be." He gestured to the tray. "Eat while I explain. You'll need your strength." Rose wanted to refuse, but her stomach was empty, and the food smelled incredible, and she was tired of being hungry on top of everything else. She pulled the tray closer, kept her eyes on the pasta instead of him. "I sent the photos to Castellano with a ransom demand," Cleto continued, his voice low and measured. "Return the $3 million plus interest, get his daughter back unharmed. Simple transaction." "And when he realizes I'm not her?" "He won't. Not from photographs. Not until it's too late." Cleto leaned forward slightly, and Rose felt the weight of his attention like physical touch. "You'll stay here until he pays. Then you'll be released. Your mother's treatment continues. You return to your life. Everyone gets what they want. I want to not be kidnapped. Unfortunately, that ship has sailed." No apology in his tone, just fact. Now we work with the situation we have. Rose finally looked at him directly, met those dark eyes that seemed to see too much. "Your men grabbed me because to them, all young black women look the same. Just say it. Your operation failed because your men are racist and sloppy." She watched him process the accusation. Watched something almost like shame flicker across his features before he controlled it. "My men made assumptions based on poor intelligence. They saw similar features. Your skin tone, your build, your hair, and didn't do proper verification. It was unacceptable." "You mean they're racist?" "Yes." The word came out sharp, almost angry. "They assumed. They were sloppy. They've been disciplined." "Disciplined how?" Rose's stomach twisted. "Did you kill them? For the mistake that landed me here?" Cleto's expression went carefully blank. "In my world, failure has consequences. That's all you need to know." The silence that followed was heavy with implications Rose didn't want to examine. Men might be dead because they'd grabbed the wrong black girl. The violence was spreading, rippling outward from that initial mistake in the CVS parking lot. "I know everything about you," Cleto said after a moment, his voice softer now, which somehow made it worse. "Rose Jones, 24. 2 jobs. CVS Pharmacy and Sal's Italian Kitchen. Columbia graduate student, art history program, GPA, 3.8, until you had to take this semester off because your mother's cancer treatments depleted your savings. Grace Jones, 52. Brain cancer stage 4. Current treatment failing. You're drowning in debt. No other family. No backup plan." Each fact landed like a small betrayal. He'd dissected her entire life, knew all her vulnerabilities, all her pressure points. "Here's my offer," Cleto continued, still in that dangerously gentle tone. "I'll pay for your mother's treatment. All of it. Experimental therapy at Memorial Sloan Kettering. Best oncologists in the country. No expense spared. She'll have a real chance at survival." Hope flared in Rose's chest, vicious and unwanted. In exchange for what? Cooperation. No escape attempts. No drama. Help me recover my money from Castellano. And your mother lives. Fight me, make this difficult, and—" He didn't finish the sentence, didn't need to. Rose's hands trembled around her fork. "That's not a choice, that's blackmail. I prefer incentivized cooperation." His smile was cold and beautiful. "But call it what you want. Your answer?" She wanted to throw the food in his face. Wanted to scream that she'd never cooperate, never help him, that he could go to hell. But her mother's face rose in her mind. Grace smiling through pain, working herself to exhaustion for Rose's education, never once complaining about the unfairness of a body that had turned against her. "You're a bastard," Rose whispered. "Yes. Do we have a deal?" "I don't have a choice. Everyone has choices. You're choosing your mother's life over your principles. That's not weakness. That's love." He stood, moved toward the door with that predatory grace. "I'll have Maria bring you better clothes tomorrow. Castellano needs to see his daughter is being treated well." Rose looked down at her half-eaten pasta, at the expensive china and silver utensils, at the prison disguised as luxury. "This is still captivity. You're still holding me prisoner." "Yes," Cleto agreed simply. "But your mother will live. Remember that when you hate me. Remember that I kept my promise." The lock clicked behind him. Rose sat in the golden evening light and finished the pasta, because wasting food felt wrong even now, even here. It tasted like ash and compromise. Like the moment she'd stopped being purely victim and became something more complicated, accomplice, survivor, daughter who'd do anything to save her mother. She went to the bathroom and stared at her reflection. The expensive clothes they'd dressed her in for the photos, the styled hair, the trapped eyes staring back. "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered to her reflection, her own dark eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I'm so sorry." But she'd made her choice. Would keep making it, every day, as many times as necessary. Because that's what love meant, compromising yourself to save the people you couldn't bear to lose. Even if it meant working with the man who'd stolen your freedom. By day 3, Rose had memorized every inch of her prison and started memorizing her captor instead. They let her move more freely now. Bedroom to dining room to library, always with guards trailing at a respectful distance. She learned their names through eavesdropping. Enzo, who watched her with undisguised hostility. Luca, older and quieter, who nodded politely when she passed. Dante, scarred and efficient, who treated her like a package to be delivered intact. She studied them all, cataloged their patterns with the survival instincts she'd honed growing up in neighborhoods where awareness meant safety. Notice everything. Trust nothing. Find advantages where you can. But it was Cleto she found herself watching most. And that terrified her more than the kidnapping itself. He worked in his study until 2 a.m. She could see the light under his door when she couldn't sleep, which was most nights. He drank a single espresso at dawn, standing at the kitchen window looking out at gardens she wasn't allowed to enter. He touched his books like prayer, fingers gentle on leather spines, lingering on certain titles as if they held answers to questions he couldn't articulate. He was, despite everything, beautiful in the way dangerous things often were. Beautiful like knives, like storms, like the Caravaggio paintings she'd studied in her previous life, all darkness and light and violence barely contained. Rose hated that she noticed. The library became her refuge because it was the one space that felt almost honest. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined with rare volumes. Italian literature, art history, philosophy, first editions and manuscripts she'd only seen in academic databases. A collection that spoke of genuine passion, not just wealth. She found him there past midnight on her 3rd night, unable to sleep, wandering under Dante's watchful escort. Cleto sat in a leather chair beneath warm lamplight, reading Machiavelli in the original Italian, his dark hair slightly disheveled, like he'd been running his fingers through it. "Il Principe?" Rose heard herself say, despite her intention to stay silent. Fitting reading for a tyrant. Cleto's lips curved slightly. Machiavelli understood that morality is a luxury of the safe. The endangered must be practical. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit. Dante, leave us." The guard hesitated, then obeyed. The door clicked shut, and Rose was suddenly intensely aware that she was alone with Cleto Farina for the first time since he'd established her captivity. She sat because standing felt like showing fear, crossed her arms because she needed the barrier. You can't sleep either, Cleto observed. Hard to sleep when you're being held prisoner. Is that what keeps you awake? Or is it the guilt? His dark eyes held hers, seeing too much. You're cooperating. That must weigh on your conscience. Rose's jaw tightened. You're blackmailing me with my mother's life. Don't pretend I have a choice. You always have choices. You're choosing survival. There's no shame in that. Easy for you to say. You're not the one in a cage. Cleto set down his book carefully. We're all in cages, Rose. Mine just has better furniture. He gestured to the library surrounding them. These books? They're my prison too. All this knowledge about justice and honor. And I've broken every principle they teach. That's not the same, isn't it? He leaned forward slightly. Tell me, do you know Caravaggio's work? The subject change was disorienting. I'm an art history student. Of course I know Caravaggio. The Taking of Christ. What do you see in it? Rose found herself answering despite her better judgment. Violence and divinity existing in the same moment. Judas betraying Christ with a kiss. Intimacy and destruction intertwined. She paused. Caravaggio painted himself into the scene, holding the lantern, the only source of light in all that darkness. The artist witnessing his own subject's destruction, making himself complicit by observing. Yes. Cleto's voice carried something like reverence. Perhaps he understood that witnessing violence implicates us. There are no innocent observers. Or maybe, Rose said quietly, he understood that we're all complicit in something, that survival requires compromise. The silence that followed felt weighted, charged. You understand more than I expected, Cleto said finally. Your neighborhood was violent? Isn't yours? Rose leaned forward, matching his intensity. Violence looks different in mansions than projects, but it's still violence. You're just better dressed while you do it. Something flickered across Cleto's face. Respect, perhaps. You're not afraid of me anymore. I'm terrified of you, Rose corrected. But fear and silence are different things. This time Cleto did smile, brief and genuine, and transforming his features into something almost kind. Good. I prefer honest enemies to false friends. A knock interrupted the moment. Enzo entered without waiting for permission, his face tight with barely controlled anger. Boss. Castellano responded. Refuses to pay. Says his daughter is safe with him. Calls the photos fake. Rose watched Cleto process this. Watched fury flash across his features before he controlled it. He's calling the bluff. Because it is a bluff, Enzo said. We have the wrong girl. This plan is dead. We should cut losses and what? Rose heard herself ask. Kill me? Enzo's silence was answer enough. No one touches her, Cleto said quietly. She's under my protection. Anyone who harms her answers to me personally. That includes you, Enzo. Enzo left, but his hostility lingered like smoke. Rose realized her hands were shaking. He wants me dead. Don't worry about Enzo. He's loyal to me. Cleto stood, poured himself whiskey. I need to recalibrate. Tell Castellano we know we have the wrong woman, but that innocent blood is on his hands if he doesn't return what he stole. Moral leverage instead of paternal. Would you hurt me to make a point to him? The pause stretched so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I don't know. I hope I won't have to find out. The honesty was somehow worse than lies would have been. 3 days ago you were just my kidnapper, Rose whispered. Now you're complicated, and I don't know which is more dangerous. Complicated is always more dangerous. Cleto's smile was sad. Simple monsters are easy to hate. Rose stood, needing distance. I should go back to my room. Rose. Don't. You're still holding me prisoner. Philosophy discussions don't change that. She fled before he could respond, before she could acknowledge that she'd been more alive in that library than she'd felt in months. And that realization was more terrifying than anything else in this beautiful prison. Week 2 arrived with the weight of inevitability. The routine became almost normal, which terrified Rose more than the kidnapping itself. You're going to be here minimum 2 months while this plays out, Cleto said on day 8, watching her in his study. I don't believe in wasted time. Use your skills. Catalog my collection. The extended timeline made her stomach drop, but the work itself was intoxicating. Cleto's collection was extraordinary. Renaissance drawings, illuminated manuscripts, pieces museums would sacrifice grants to acquire. Handling them with white-gloved precision felt like the graduate work she'd abandoned when her mother got sick. Felt like the life she was supposed to be living. "Why Renaissance art specifically?" Rose asked one afternoon, photographing a delicate Botticelli sketch. Cleto looked up from authentication documents. Beauty born from violence. The Renaissance emerged from plague, war, political chaos. Artists created transcendent work while their cities burned. He paused. "I wanted proof that something worthwhile could survive terrible circumstances. This sketch alone is worth 6 figures. Your whole collection. You could fund a museum. These are mine, personal." He stood, moved closer to see her work, close enough that she could smell cedar and ink. "The business is different. This is just for me. And now me." Rose glanced up. "You're sharing them with me. Because you understand them." His voice dropped. "You see what I see." Rose pulled back from the dangerous intimacy. "That doesn't make us the same." But the conversations continued. Rose found herself working beside him daily, their discussions ranging from color theory to philosophy, from Titian's techniques to the nature of survival. She cataloged his routines as carefully as his art, the way he held his espresso cup each morning like a prayer, the reverence with which he touched first editions, how his voice transformed when discussing beauty. She was learning him. And he was learning her. Late one evening, working on an illuminated manuscript together, their hands touched, reaching for the same magnifying glass. Both froze. Cleto's thumb traced the fading marks on her wrist. The zip-tie wounds almost healed now. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. First direct apology since that initial night. For all of it. Rose's breath caught. "Sorry doesn't change anything." "No." His thumb continued its slow path. "But I am sorry, for what it's worth." "It's not worth much." But Rose didn't pull away. "You're still keeping me here." "Yes." He released her wrist, but his dark eyes held hers. "But I'm sorry anyway." Rose stood abruptly, heart racing. "I need to go." "Rose. Don't." She was at the door, not looking back. "Don't make this more than it is. You're my captor. I'm your prisoner. Everything else is just confusion." The word hung between them in the library's amber light, inadequate and true all at once. Cleto didn't move, but his stillness was its own kind of approach. "Confusion?" he repeated. "Is that what you call it when your heart races every time I enter a room? When you touch books I've touched, like you're trying to understand me through the things I love?" Rose's breath caught. She hadn't realized he'd noticed. "You watch me," Cleto continued, "the way I watch you, like you're trying to solve a puzzle that keeps changing shape." "This is insane," she said, turning to face him. "You kidnapped me." "Yes." "You threatened my mother." "Yes." "This isn't. It can't be real." Cleto's jaw tightened. "You think I don't know that? You think I haven't spent every night hating myself for what I feel? For wanting things I have absolutely no right to want?" Rose's pulse hammered. "What do you want, Cleto?" His name on her lips seemed to undo something in him. He closed the distance between them, not touching but close enough that she could feel his body heat. "I want to earn the right to want you. I want to undo every moment of violence I brought into your life. I want impossible things." Rose's hand lifted of its own accord, hovering in the space between them. She could touch him, his chest, his face, could close the final inches. Cleto's eyes tracked the movement. "Don't," he said, but it came out broken. "If you touch me, Rose, I won't be able to. I need you to leave. Please." The please broke her. Rose's hand fell back to her side. "This can't happen," she whispered. "I know. I should hate you. You should." His voice dropped. "But you don't, and that's what terrifies you. You're starting to care about the man who took everything from you, and you don't know what that makes you." He'd articulated the fear she couldn't name, the guilt keeping her awake at night. "I need time," she managed. "Take it. I've waited 15 years for revenge. I can wait for you." He stepped back, creating space. "But Rose, tomorrow everything changes." Castellanos agreed to a meeting. "I need you there." Her stomach dropped. "To negotiate my release?" To negotiate terms. The warmth disappeared, replaced by cold calculation. He needs to see you. Believe I'm willing to follow through on threats. But Rose, I won't let him hurt you, that's my promise. Would you really hurt me for leverage? No. The certainty in his voice surprised her. I realized something these past weeks. Revenge isn't worth what it costs. Not anymore. The morning of the meeting, Rose woke to held breath silence. The entire estate seemed to be waiting. Over breakfast, Cleto looked exhausted. I should check the Botticelli authentication, Rose said, seeking normalcy. If we're presenting it to the buyer next week. We're not. I've canceled the sale. At her surprised look, he continued. When this is over, you'll need academic references, letters of recommendation. I'm creating a cover story. You worked as a private consultant for Farina Import Company. The Botticelli will be your showcase piece, so you have something to show for the time lost. Rose's chest tightened. You're building me a career out of kidnapping. I'm trying to give you back what I took. She fled to his study, unable to process the complexity of him. The filing cabinet sat in the corner, usually locked. Today it stood slightly ajar. Rose should have left it alone. But curiosity drew her across the room. The Castellano folder was easy to find. Too easy. Like it had been left for her. Financial records came first. Then surveillance photos of Vincent Castellano. Then she found photographs that changed everything. Rosa Castellano in candid moments. At first, simple surveillance. But patterns emerged. Makeup concealing bruises, sunglasses hiding black eyes, her father's fingers leaving marks on her wrist. Medical records followed. Emergency room visits spanning 5 years. Fell downstairs. Walked into door. The excuses that meant abuse. Rosa Castellano wasn't just a mobster's daughter. She was a victim. And Cleto had known. The final folder contained Antonio Farina's murder file, crime scene photos, a restaurant in Little Italy, white tablecloths soaked red, the police report, mob hit, case went cold. A handwritten note in Italian translated in margins. Castellano ordered the hit. Antonio refused to partner in his trafficking operation, made him liability. Below that, in Cleto's handwriting, he was innocent. The door opened. Rose spun, files clutched to her chest. Cleto stood in the doorway, expression unreadable. You found them. You left them for me to find. Her voice steadied. You wanted me to see this. Yes. Rosa Castellano is being abused by her father, has been for years, and you were going to use her anyway. Cleto moved into the room carefully. I was going to take her from him, get her away from Castellano. Sometimes rescue looks like kidnapping when you don't have time to ask permission. That's a rationalization. It's the truth. I'm a monster, Rose. I've done monstrous things. But I'm not the kind who'd deliver a woman back to her abuser. I was going to offer Rosa a choice. Return to her father, or take money and protection and disappear. Rose processed this. The kidnapping was a rescue mission? Nothing is simple in my world. Yes, I wanted my money back. Yes, I wanted Castellano to suffer. But I also saw the bruises. Saw a woman trapped the same way my mother was trapped before my father saved her. His voice roughened. So yes, I was going to use her, and save her. Both are true. Your father, Rose said, looking at the murder file. He was legitimate? An art dealer. Castellano approached him about partnership, using the gallery to launder money. Antonio refused. Said he'd built something clean and wouldn't corrupt it. Cleto's jaw tightened. So Castellano killed him, execution style in front of me. I was 19. Rose saw it. A boy watching his father die, making promises he'd spend 15 years keeping. You built the organization from nothing. From rage and grief. Antonio Farina was a good man who died for refusing to be corrupt. His son became exactly what he'd rejected. He looked at her with desperation. You asked if I'd hurt you to make a point. I already know the answer. I wouldn't. I'd let Castellano keep everything. The money, his freedom, all of it, before I'd let him touch you. Rose's breath caught. That's choosing me over revenge. Yes. Why? He moved closer. Because you're the first truly good thing I've touched in 15 years. Because you look at me and see something worth saving, And I want to deserve that. Because when I'm with you, I remember what it felt like to be human. Rose's chest tightened. People could be multiple things at once. Criminal and protector, captor and savior, monster and man. What if we helped her? The words came before she thought them through. The real Rosa. What if instead of using her, we got her away from him? No leverage, no schemes. Just help. Cleto stared. That doesn't get my money back. No. But it's the right thing to do. Rose set down the files. You told me about your father, how he chose integrity over profit, goodness over corruption. Maybe the way to honor him isn't revenge. Maybe it's becoming the kind of man who helps women escape violence instead of using them. That's naive. It's human. Rose stepped closer. You said I make you human again. Prove it. Choose to be better than Castellano. Help Rosa, because she needs help, not because it serves your vendetta. Cleto's eyes closed briefly. When they opened, Rose saw war happening behind them. 15 years of purpose warring with something newer, more fragile. If I do this, he said slowly, I lose my only advantage. Castellano keeps my money. My father's death goes unavenged. Or everything you've built becomes foundation for something better. Rose reached out, fingers hovering near his. Your father died refusing to be corrupt. You can live refusing to cause the suffering he fought against. Cleto's fingers closed the distance, wrapping around hers with impossible gentleness. You're going to ruin me, he whispered. Or save you, depending on perspective. Tomorrow, at the meeting. Whatever happens, I need you to know I'm choosing you. Over revenge, over everything. He lifted her hand, pressed his lips to her knuckles. You changed me first. He left her standing in the study, mind spinning with what he'd offered. Not just help for Rosa, but himself. His choice to become someone different. Rose looked at the scattered files. Antonio Farina's murder photos, Rosa's medical records, violence building upon violence, creating cycles that seemed unbreakable, unless someone chose to break them. She thought about her grandmother Josephine, dancing despite segregation. About her mother Grace, working 3 jobs with dignity. About Rosa, surviving years of abuse. About all the women who'd built beauty from ashes. Maybe that was the legacy worth inheriting. Not revenge, but the courage to choose differently. Tomorrow would tell if that courage was enough. If Cleto's promise meant what she hoped. If they could survive what was coming. Tonight would be the meeting. An illusion of control. A performance for Castellano. Tomorrow would be the real gamble. Rosa's rescue. The warehouse district looked like something out of a noir film. All shadows and sodium lights and the promise of violence poorly disguised as business. Rose sat in the back of Cleto's car, hands steady despite the fear curling through her stomach, and watched the city transform into something more honest. Here, away from Manhattan's polished veneer, you could see the bones of things, the raw structures that held up the pretty facades. Like Cleto himself, beautiful surface, brutal foundation, and somewhere in between, the complicated truth. You don't have to do this, he said quietly, eyes meeting hers in the rearview mirror. Dante was driving, silent and efficient, while Luca and 2 other men Rose didn't know well followed in a second vehicle. A small army for what was supposed to be a negotiation. I can still send you back to the estate, keep you safe. Safe doesn't help, Rosa. Rose straightened her shoulders, adjusted the elegant black dress that felt too much like armor and not enough like protection. If Castellano sees me, sees that I'm cooperating, maybe he believes you're serious about the exchange. Maybe that buys us leverage for what comes after. What comes after? Being the plan they'd formed in the early morning hours. Rosa's rescue that would happen regardless of tonight's outcome. Cleto had people watching Castellano's Manhattan penthouse, had identified patterns in Rosa's security detail, had found the weaknesses in her father's carefully constructed cage. Tomorrow, they'd exploit those weaknesses. Tonight was just performance, making Castellano believe the game was still in play. The car pulled into the designated meeting spot, a warehouse that had once processed shipping containers, now abandoned except for the rats and the occasional drug deal. Neutral ground, they'd called it. But Rose had learned enough about Cleto's world to know there was no such thing as neutral. There was only territory you controlled and territory you invaded. The question was which this would be. Cleto had coached her during the drive. Stay behind me. Don't speak unless directly addressed. If shooting starts, and it might, drop flat, cover your head, don't move until I tell you. The instructions had been matter-of-fact, delivered in the same tone someone might use to explain dinner reservations. In his world, violence was just another scheduled appointment. They exited the car into cold November night air that tasted like metal and old rain. Rose's heels clicked against concrete, too loud, marking her presence to anyone listening. Cleto moved beside her with that predatory grace she'd come to recognize, balanced on the balls of his feet, ready to react to threat from any direction. His hand found the small of her back, guiding her forward. The touch was proprietary and protective both, sending heat through Rose's spine despite the circumstances. Or maybe because of them. Danger and desire had become tangled together somewhere in the past weeks, creating a knot she couldn't untie. Didn't want to untie. The warehouse interior was vast and empty, their footsteps echoing off metal walls. Industrial lighting cast harsh shadows, making everyone look like villains in a crime drama, which Rose supposed they were. There were no heroes here, just people with different justifications for violence. Castellano's men were already in position. Rose counted 6 that she could see, probably more hidden in the shipping containers that lined the walls. Their hands rested near weapons, fingers twitching with barely controlled aggression. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a powder keg waiting for a spark. Vincent Castellano himself stood in the center of the space, backlit like a villain in a Renaissance painting. He was older than his photographs suggested. Steel gray hair, and a face that had once been handsome but had been weathered by cruelty into something harder. He wore an expensive suit that Rose recognized as Brioni. She'd cataloged enough high-end wardrobes to identify tailoring at a glance, and moved with the confidence of a man who'd never faced consequences for his actions, who'd killed fathers and beaten daughters and called it business as usual. Rose felt Cleto tense beside her as their eyes met across the warehouse. 15 years of hatred compressed into a single look, dense enough to collapse into violence. "Farina," Castellano said, voice carrying that particular Italian-American accent that spoke to generations in New York. "You asked for a meeting. Here I am. And you brought an army." Cleto's tone was mild, but Rose felt the coiled readiness in his body. "Not very trusting. Neither are you." Castellano's eyes slid to Rose, assessing her with the cold calculation of a man pricing property. "This is her? The girl you claim is my daughter?" "This is Rose Jones," Cleto said, and Rose felt a flash of surprise that he'd used her real name. Not claimed she was Rosa, not maintained the fiction, just offered truth. "The woman my men took by mistake when they were looking for your daughter. Similar build, similar features, in poor lighting, easy to confuse." Rose saw Castellano's expression shift, confusion replacing certainty. He'd been expecting confirmation that his daughter was captive. Instead, Cleto had just admitted to kidnapping the wrong woman entirely. The truth as weapon. It was a strange strategy. "Then you have nothing I want," Castellano said slowly. "I have evidence." Cleto gestured to Dante, who stepped forward with a laptop. 15 years of documentation on your operation. Money laundering, racketeering, human trafficking. Names, dates, bank accounts. Everything the FBI would need to dismantle your entire organization. "You'd go to the feds?" Castellano's voice dripped contempt. "You'd break omerta over money? I'd burn everything down to punish you for killing my father." Cleto's voice was cold enough to freeze blood. "Antonio Farina was a good man, an innocent man. You murdered him for refusing to be corrupt. That debt comes due. Return the $3 million you stole, or I hand this evidence to federal prosecutors and watch your empire crumble." The warehouse filled with the kind of silence that preceded violence. Rose felt it building, felt the men on both sides preparing for the inevitable. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was the moment. This was when it would all shatter or solidify into something they could survive. "I didn't steal anything from you," Castellano said finally. "Your accusations are fantasies. Then let's discuss your daughter instead." Cleto's tone shifted, became something sharper. "Rosa, how is she?" Castellano's face went carefully blank. "My daughter is none of your concern." "I disagree. I have medical records, emergency room visits, 5 years of documented abuse." Cleto's voice was quiet, deadly. You beat your daughter. Regularly. With enough force to fracture ribs, dislocate shoulders, leave bruises she covers with makeup and long sleeves. That's not my business? That's not something I should concern myself with? Rose watched color flood Castellano's face. Rage replacing calculation. She'd seen this expression before, in her own neighborhood. Men who were used to having absolute control, confronted with their private violence made public. You know nothing about my family. I know everything about your family. Cleto pulled photos from his jacket, copies of what Rose had found in the files, and let them fall to the concrete floor. Rose's bruises, captured in unforgiving detail. I was going to use her, kidnap her like I took Rose, hold her for ransom. But then I saw these, and I realized, I'm not rescuing your daughter for leverage. I'm rescuing her because someone needs to. The words hung in the cold air, a declaration that shifted the entire confrontation's foundation. Rose's breath caught. He was doing it. Abandoning revenge, choosing righteousness, becoming the man his father might have been proud of. Castellano's laugh was ugly. You think you're a hero? You kidnap innocent women and call it rescue? No. I think I'm a man trying to be slightly less terrible than I was yesterday. Cleto's hand found Rose's back again, that same possessive, protective touch. You can keep the money, keep your operation, keep everything. But Rosa leaves, tonight, voluntarily, with protection and resources to build a new life away from you. She'll never agree to that. She's loyal. She's terrified. Rose found her voice, stepping forward despite Cleto's attempt to keep her behind him. I've seen the photos, the medical records. That's not loyalty. That's survival. And you're mistaking her fear for love, because it's convenient. Castellano's eyes fixed on her with predatory focus. You're the wrong girl. You mean nothing in this. I mean, I recognize abuse when I see it. I grew up around violence too. Different circumstances, same result. Powerful men hurting people they're supposed to protect. Rose lifted her chin, channeling her grandmother's courage, her mother's steel. You don't get to define what matters here. Rosa matters. And we're taking her out of your reach. The silence that followed felt like the pause before an explosion. Then Castellano smiled. Cold. Calculated. You're walking into an ambush. You realize that? The words were barely out before Rose heard movement behind the shipping containers. Boot steps, weapons being readied, the unmistakable sound of a trap springing shut. Her survival instincts, honed in neighborhoods where awareness meant living, screamed danger. Down! Rose didn't think, just moved, grabbing Cleto's arm and pulling him sideways as gunfire erupted from 3 directions at once. The warehouse exploded into chaos. Bullets ricocheted off metal with sounds like angry wasps, sparking where they hit machinery. Cleto flipped a nearby table. Old, scarred wood that wouldn't stop much but provided illusion of cover. Rose hit concrete hard, hands over her head, tasting dust and fear. Around her, shouting in Italian and English, the percussion of gunfire, breaking glass. Dante returned fire with cold precision, dropping one of Castellano's men before diving behind a support pillar. Luca went down. Rose saw blood spreading dark across his shirt. Saw him fall and not get up. The violence was nothing like movies. It was faster, louder, more chaotic. 90 seconds that felt like hours. Her world compressed to the sound of her own racing heartbeat and the weight of Cleto's body half covering hers, shielding her from the crossfire. Then, as suddenly as it started, silence fell. Heavy, weighted with gun smoke and death. Rose lifted her head slowly, ears ringing, bodies on the ground. She counted 5 of Castellano's men, 2 of Cleto's. Luca wasn't moving. The young guard whose name she'd never learned was clutching a shoulder wound, blood seeping between his fingers. Dante had taken a bullet but was still standing, his face gray with pain and rage. And Castellano, gone. Fled during the chaos like the coward he was, leaving his men to die for his violence. Cleto pulled Rose up with hands that shook slightly. The first time she'd seen him show physical reaction to fear. His fingers traced her face, her arms, checking for wounds with the desperation of a man who'd just faced losing something invaluable. Are you hurt? His voice was rough, barely controlled. No. You? I'm fine. But his forehead dropped to touch hers, just for a moment. An intimacy more profound than any kiss could be. You saved my life. Again. You saw the ambush before I did. Rose's hands fisted in his jacket, needing the anchor of solid warmth to prove they were both still alive. You're men. I know. Cleto straightened, the vulnerable moment passing as duty reasserted itself. He moved to Luca first, checking for pulse and finding none. His jaw tightened, but his voice stayed steady when he spoke to Dante. Get the wounded to the car. Call Dr. Russo, and someone call cleanup. We can't leave bodies. Boss. Dante's voice carried warning. I know. Castellano will retaliate. We need to move fast. Cleto turned to Rose, and in his eyes she saw war being waged, between the man who wanted revenge and the man who'd promised to be better. Rosa, we get her tonight, before Castellano can reinforce security or move her to a different location. This is our only window. Rose nodded, adrenaline still singing through her veins, making everything feel sharp-edged and surreal. What do you need me to do? Come with me. Help convince her to trust us. His hand found hers, squeezing once. Partners? Partners, Rose agreed, and meant it. They left the warehouse behind. The bodies, the blood, the evidence of violence that would haunt Rose's dreams for months. But they drove with purpose now, toward Manhattan's gleaming towers where another woman waited in a different kind of cage. Waited for rescue she didn't know was coming. In the car, Rose's hands finally started shaking. Delayed reaction to how close death had been, how quickly violence had erupted. Cleto noticed, covered her trembling fingers with his own steady ones. You're in shock, he said quietly. I watched Mendy. I know. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing for your world, Rose said, finding strength in anger. You didn't ask me to be here. But I am. And if I'm in this, if I'm your partner, then you don't get to shelter me from the consequences. I see it. All of it. The beauty and the blood. Something shifted in Cleto's expression. Respect, maybe. Or recognition that Rose wasn't the same woman who'd been zip-tied in the back of a van 6 weeks ago. She'd been forged into something harder by circumstance, had learned to stand upright in the spaces between right and wrong, had become, in her own way, formidable. All right, he said simply. No more sheltering. We do this together. Save Rosa, face whatever comes after, build something new from the ruins of what we've burned. Rose looked out at the city lights streaming past. New York in all its complicated glory, beautiful and brutal, where dreams and nightmares occupied the same crowded streets. What if she doesn't want to be saved? Then we give her the choice, real choice, and accept whatever she decides. Cleto's thumb traced circles on Rose's wrist, just above where the zip-tie scars had finally faded completely. That's what makes us different from Castellano. We offer freedom. He only knows control. The penthouse building rose before them, glass and steel reaching toward a sky too light-polluted for stars. Inside, Rosa Castellano lived in luxury that doubled as prison, surrounded by wealth that couldn't buy safety from the violence closest to home. Rose thought about her own journey. From CVS parking lot to art authentication to warehouse shootout, and wondered if Rosa's would follow similar curves. If salvation could look like kidnapping when you had no other way out. They were about to find out. The penthouse lobby was all marble and modern art, the kind of aggressive luxury that insisted on its own importance. Rose felt out of place in her blood-flecked dress, adrenaline still making her movements too sharp, too quick. But Cleto moved through the space with absolute confidence, nodding to the doorman like he belonged there. Service entrance, he murmured to Rose. Security's lighter on that side. Dante disabled the cameras remotely. They bypassed the main elevators, slipping into a maintenance corridor that smelled like cleaning chemicals and old concrete. Here, away from the lobby's performative elegance, the building showed its bones, utilitarian, honest, functional, like the space between who people pretended to be and who they actually were. Rose's heart hammered as they climbed service stairs, each floor bringing them closer to confrontation or rescue or both. Cleto moved like smoke, silent despite his size, each footfall precisely placed. Behind them, Marco and Dante followed. Armed, efficient, ready for violence if it came. 23rd floor. The door to Rosa's penthouse service entrance was locked, But Marco made quick work of it with tools Rose didn't want to examine too closely. They entered into a kitchen that looked like a showroom. Pristine, unused, decorative rather than functional. Rose's bedroom is down the main hall, Cleto whispered. 2 guards rotate outside her door. We need to neutralize them quietly. Rose opened her mouth to ask how, then watched Dante and Marco move with practiced efficiency. Pressure points, sleeper holds, the kind of violence that didn't kill but incapacitated. The guards went down without sound beyond soft impacts against expensive flooring. Stay here, Cleto said to Rose, hand already on Rose's bedroom door. No, Rose pushed past him. She needs to see a woman first. Trust a woman. You're just another man with power telling her what to do. Cleto's jaw tightened, but he nodded, stepped back, let Rose take lead. She knocked softly. Rosa? My name is Rose Jones. I need to talk to you. It's about your father. Silence. Then, barely audible. Go away. I can't do that. Please, I'm here to help. Everyone says that. Rosa's voice carried the flatness of someone who'd stopped believing in help. Right before they hurt me. Rose's chest tightened. She knew that tone. Had heard it in her own voice once, before her mother taught her that survival required hope, however foolish. Your father isn't here, Rose said through the door. He's across town dealing with a situation. We have maybe 30 minutes before his men realize something's wrong. I'm asking you to open this door and listen. That's all. Just listen. Another pause. Then locks turning. 3 of them, Rose counted, each one its own small prison. The door opened a crack, and Rose saw a face that could have been her own reflection if genetics had shifted slightly. Brown skin, natural curls, dark eyes filled with wariness that came from hard-earned wisdom about trusting the wrong people. Rosa was beautiful in the way survivors often were. Hollowed out by pain but still standing, still breathing, still hoping despite every reason not to. You're the wrong girl, Rosa whispered, staring at Rose. The one Farina's men took instead of me. Yes. And now I'm here because I saw your medical records. I know what your father does to you. Rose kept her voice gentle but firm. I'm here to offer you a choice. Stay with him or leave. Right now. Tonight. With protection and money and everything you need to disappear. Rosa's laugh was bitter. Why? Why would you? A stranger. Risk anything for me? Because someone showed me that people can choose to be better than their worst impulses. Rose glanced back at Cleto, standing in the shadows, letting her lead. Because I understand what it's like to be someone's possession, and because you deserve better than a father who beats you. Rose's eyes filled with tears she didn't let fall. Years of practice holding them back, Rose recognized. Years of learning that crying was dangerous, that showing pain invited more of it. If I leave, he'll come after me. He has resources. So do we. Cleto stepped forward, careful to keep distance, to not crowd or threaten. Miss Castellano, I'm Cleto Farina. Your father killed mine 15 years ago. I was going to use you for revenge. But Rose taught me that revenge is just another form of violence. So instead, I'm offering you freedom. New identity, new city, financial support. Help building whatever life you want away from him. Rosa stared at him like he was speaking a language she didn't understand. You're just going to let me go? No strings? One string, Cleto said honestly. If you choose to testify against your father's criminal operation, if you provide evidence to federal prosecutors, we can help ensure he never hurts anyone again. But that's your choice. You can walk away entirely if that's what you need. We're not holding your freedom hostage to our agenda. Rose watched Rosa process this, saw hope and fear warring in her expression. She stepped forward, closing the distance between them, and took Rosa's hands in hers. I know it's terrifying. I know trusting feels impossible, but look at my wrists. She turned her hands over, showing the faint lines where zip ties had cut skin 6 weeks ago. These are from when Cleto's men kidnapped me, when they zip-tied me and threw me in a van and terrified me. I have every reason to hate him, to want him to suffer. But people are complicated. They can do terrible things and still choose to change. He's choosing to help you because it's right. Let him. Rose's fingers traced the scars, reading violence in Rose's skin like Braille. You stayed with him? After he did this? It's complicated. But yes, I stayed. I saw him become someone different, someone better. And if that's possible for him, for a man who built his life on revenge, then it's possible for you too. You can become someone new. Tears finally spilled down Rose's cheeks. I don't know who I am without the fear. Then let's find out together. Rose squeezed her hands. We have maybe 20 minutes. Pack what matters. Documents, photos, things you can't replace. Clothes we can buy. Freedom we can't. Rosa nodded slowly, then with growing certainty. She moved into her room, pulling out a travel bag, filling it with methodical efficiency that spoke to someone who'd fantasized about running many times before. Documents from a safe. Jewelry that was probably expensive but looked sentimental. A photograph of a woman who must have been her mother, smiling in a way that suggested the photo was old, from a time before Rosa's father became whatever he was now. She died when I was 12, Rosa said, seeing Rose notice the photo. Cancer. After that my father changed. Or maybe he was always this way and she protected me from seeing it. Either way, Rose said softly, you're not her responsibility anymore. You're your own. They moved quickly after that. Down the service stairs, through the loading dock, into waiting cars that would take them to a safe house Cleto owned in New Jersey. Rosa sat in the back seat between Rose and Cleto, looking shell-shocked, occasionally touching her own face like she needed to confirm she was real. This was happening. She'd actually escaped. He'll retaliate, she said as they drove through the Lincoln Tunnel. When he realizes I'm gone, he'll be furious. Let him be. Cleto's voice was steel. He's lost his power over you. Anything he does now is just empty violence, and I'll make sure you're protected from it. Rosa turned to look at him. Really look at him. Seeing perhaps what Rose had seen. Complicated man capable of both terrible things and unexpected grace. Why? Why does my freedom matter to you? Because my father taught me that protecting the vulnerable was the only real power worth having. Cleto's eyes met Rose's across Rosa's head, and the look they shared was weighted with all the history between them. Violence and rescue, and the strange alchemy that had transformed captivity into something else. And because the woman I love showed me what it looks like to choose righteousness over revenge. Rose's breath caught. He'd said it. Named the thing between them, made it real with words that couldn't be taken back. Rosa looked between them, understanding dawning. You love your kidnapper. I love the man he became after. Rose's voice was steady despite her racing heart. There's a difference. They reached the safe house as dawn began breaking over New Jersey. A modest home in a quiet suburb, the kind of place where no one asked questions about the people renting the house on the corner. Inside, Cleto's people had prepared everything. Clothes in Rosa's size, toiletries, food, everything she'd need for the immediate future. Rest, Cleto told Rosa. We'll discuss next steps tomorrow. For now, you're safe. Rosa nodded, exhausted, and let Maria, who'd arrived earlier to prepare the house, guide her to a bedroom. Rose and Cleto were left alone in the living room as early morning light filtered through curtains, painting everything in soft gold. You said you loved me, Rose said quietly. I do. No hesitation, no qualification. I love you, Rose. I've loved you since you looked at Caravaggio and understood what I understood about darkness and light. I just couldn't admit it while you were captive, while the power imbalance made anything between us corrupt. And now? Now Rosa's free. Now you've seen the worst of my world and chosen to stay anyway. Now. He moved closer, careful and deliberate, giving her every opportunity to refuse. Now I'm asking if you meant what you said in the library, if you still want me to kiss you, because I've been exercising restraint for weeks, and if I'm honest, I'm not sure I can manage it much longer. Rose's heart hammered. They'd crossed so many boundaries already. Captor and captive, enemy and ally, strangers and something approaching partners. What was one more boundary? What was admitting that desire had been building beneath everything else, growing in the spaces between philosophical debates and late-night conversations, and the moment he'd pressed his lips to her knuckles like she was something precious? I'm not captive anymore, Rose said, testing the words. No, I'm not staying because I have to. My mother's treatment is covered regardless. I have my authentication portfolio. I could walk away right now. You could, but I don't want to. Rose closed the remaining distance between them, hands finding his chest, feeling his heart race beneath expensive fabric. I want to know what it feels like to choose you, freely, without coercion or captivity or any of the complicated power dynamics that made everything before this moment wrong. Cleto's hands came up to cup her face with devastating gentleness. Are you sure? Because once I kiss you, Rose, I'm not going to want to stop. I'm going to want everything. All of you. Every complicated, brilliant, frustrating part of you. Then take it, Rose whispered. Take what I'm offering. Because I'm choosing this. I'm choosing you. The kiss, when it finally came, felt like inevitability. Like the conclusion to an argument they'd been having since that first night in the library, when they'd circled each other with words as weapons and curiosity as armor. His lips were softer than she'd imagined, the kiss itself careful despite the hunger she could feel thrumming through him. Rose melted into it, hands sliding up to tangle in his hair, pulling him closer, needing to feel every point of contact. He tasted like coffee and something darker, whiskey maybe, or just the flavor of complicated men who carried violence and gentleness in equal measure. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cleto rested his forehead against hers. Stay with me, not as captive or guest or anything with boundaries. Just stay. Build something with me. Help me become the man my father wanted me to be. What if I can't? What if you're too broken, or I'm too damaged, or this whole thing is just trauma masquerading as love? Then we'll figure it out together. His thumb traced her cheekbone, the gesture becoming familiar, becoming theirs. I can't promise easy, Rose. I can't promise my past won't create complications. But I can promise that I'll never lie to you, never manipulate you, never make you question whether your choices are yours. And I can promise that I love you. Not despite the complicated beginning, but including all of it. Because it made us who we are. Rose kissed him again, deeper this time, letting herself feel the full weight of what she was choosing. A man with blood on his hands and books on his shelves. A criminal with a code. A kidnapper who'd become something more complicated than villain or hero. A partner. I'll stay, she said against his lips. For now. We'll see what comes after. For now is enough. Cleto pulled her close, wrapping her in arms that had once restrained her and now offered shelter. For now is everything. Outside, dawn continued breaking over New Jersey suburbs. Inside, two people who'd found each other in the worst possible way chose to stay together. Chose to build something new from violence and captivity and the strange grace of second chances. It wouldn't be simple. But simple had never been an option for them anyway. The FBI arrived at the safe house 3 days later, and Rose watched Cleto's carefully constructed world begin to unravel with the same methodical precision he'd used to build it. Special Agent Patricia Moreno was exactly what Rose expected. Sharp-eyed, no nonsense, carrying herself with the confidence of someone who'd seen every kind of corruption and believed in justice anyway. She entered the living room with 2 other agents, her gaze sweeping the space, cataloging Rose, Cleto, Rosa, and the various security measures in place with professional efficiency. Mr. Farina. Miss Jones. Miss Castellano. Moreno settled into the chair across from them like she was conducting a job interview rather than confronting organized crime. We need to talk about what happened at the warehouse. Before we begin, Cleto said calmly, already prepared, I'd like to offer my cooperation in exchange for certain considerations. Moreno's eyebrow arched. You're going to negotiate before I've even explained why we're here? You're here because Vincent Castellano reported that his daughter was kidnapped by me. You're here because a warehouse shootout left 7 dead. You're here because Rose Jones, he glanced at Rose with something warm in his eyes, was reported missing 6 weeks ago by her place of employment, though no police report was filed by her mother, which probably raised flags. You've thought this through, Moreno observed. I've thought about little else for the past 72 hours. Cleto leaned forward, hands clasped, the picture of earnest cooperation. Here's what I'm offering. Complete testimony against Vincent Castellano's criminal organization. Financial records, names, dates, evidence of money laundering, racketeering, and human trafficking spanning 2 decades. Everything you need to dismantle his entire operation. In exchange for immunity for Rose Jones, who was an unwilling victim of mistaken identity kidnapping and has committed no crimes. Protection for Rosa Castellano, who is leaving her father's organization and will provide corroborating testimony. And for myself, Cleto's voice steadied, accepting consequence with grace. Reduced charges. I'll plead guilty to conspiracy and obstruction. Accept sentencing, but I want the people I care about protected. Rose reached for his hand without thinking, their fingers intertwining automatically. Moreno noticed, her sharp eyes tracking the movement, reading volumes in that simple gesture of support. You understand, Moreno said carefully, that kidnapping carries significant prison time. Even with cooperation, even with mitigating circumstances, you're looking at years. I understand. I'm willing to accept that. Cleto squeezed Rosa's hand once. But first, we take down Castellano. We make sure Rosa is safe. We ensure Rose can return to her life without repercussions. Those are my terms. Moreno turned her attention to Rose. Miss Jones, you were kidnapped 6 weeks ago, held against your will. Why didn't you try to escape? Why didn't you contact authorities when you had opportunity? Rose met her gaze steadily. Because my mother has stage 4 brain cancer, and Cleto paid for her treatment. Because I was told cooperation ensured her care continued, and I wasn't willing to risk her life for my freedom, because... She paused, choosing honesty over self-preservation. Because the situation became complicated. Complicated how? I fell in love with him. The words hung in the air, radical in their simplicity. I know how that sounds. I know what you're thinking. Stockholm Syndrome, trauma bonding, victim identifying with captor. But it's not that simple. Or maybe it is that simple, and simple is just more complicated than we want to admit. Moreno's expression remained neutral, but Rose saw something shift. Not quite sympathy, but understanding that people contained multitudes, that situations defied easy categorization. Agent Moreno, Rosa spoke up, her voice gaining strength with each word. My father has been physically abusing me for 5 years. I have medical records, hospital visits, evidence of systematic violence. Cleto Farina didn't kidnap me. He rescued me. He gave me choice my father never did. If you're looking for monsters, Vincent Castellano is the one you want. Moreno pulled out a file, flipped it open. We've been building a case against your father for 3 years, Miss Castellano. But his reach is extensive, and witnesses tend to disappear or recant testimony. If you're willing to testify, if Mr. Farina's evidence is as comprehensive as he claims, we can finally make charges stick. I'll testify, Rosa said firmly. About everything. The abuse, the criminal organization, everything I know, on one condition. What condition? Rose goes free. Completely free. No charges, no investigation, nothing. She was collateral damage in a war between my father and Cleto. She's innocent. I kidnapped her, Cleto interjected. Rose is a victim. Rose saved my life. Rosa interrupted. She convinced you to help me instead of using me. She chose compassion when revenge would have been easier. If anyone deserves immunity here, it's her. The 3 of them. Rose, Cleto, and Rosa. Presented a united front that seemed to surprise Moreno. Perhaps she'd expected the typical dynamics, victim and captor, adversarial and defensive. Instead, she was facing people who'd formed genuine bonds despite the violence that brought them together. I need to interview each of you separately, Moreno said finally. Get statements, review evidence, corroborate testimony. This isn't something we can resolve in one conversation. They spent the next 6 hours being interviewed. Rose told the truth. All of it. The kidnapping, the captivity, the gradual shift from prisoner to something else. Cleto's evolution from captor to protector. The moment in the warehouse when she'd realized he was choosing justice over revenge. You understand, Moreno said during Rose's interview, that loving your kidnapper doesn't negate the kidnapping. Crime was still committed. Trauma was still inflicted. I know, Rose said quietly. I'm not asking you to excuse what he did. I'm asking you to see what he became after. People can change, Agent Moreno. Not all of them. Maybe not even most. But some do. And Cleto did. Because of you? Maybe. Or maybe because he was ready to change and I just happened to be there when it happened. Either way, the change is real. And punishing him for growth feels like punishing anyone who tries to be better than they were. Justice isn't about redemption, Miss Jones. It's about consequences. Can't it be both? Rose met the agent's eyes. Can't we hold people accountable for their actions while still acknowledging when they choose differently? Otherwise, what's the point of trying to change? If we're condemned forever by our worst moments, why would anyone try to become better? Moreno didn't answer, but something in her expression suggested Rose's words had landed. By evening, they had a plan. Cleto would provide his evidence. Rosa would testify. Rose would be granted immunity in exchange for her cooperation. And Cleto would plead guilty to reduced charges, accept a suspended sentence with community service and restitution, and hope the judge saw what Rose saw. A man genuinely trying to become better than his crimes. It's not guaranteed, Moreno warned as she prepared to leave. Judges can be unpredictable. The prosecution might push for harsher sentencing. But if everything you've told me is accurate, if the evidence is as comprehensive as you claim, we have a shot at putting Castellano away for life while giving you all some version of a future. After Moreno left, the three of them sat in the living room, exhausted and uncertain. Rosa had been given a new identity, would be entering witness protection until after the trial. Rose would return to her life, to her mother, to her graduate studies, to the normal world that felt increasingly foreign. And Cleto faced trial and sentencing and the possibility that his attempt at redemption might not be enough to overcome his crimes. I might go to prison, he said quietly, looking at Rose. Even with cooperation, even with everything we're offering, the judge might decide I deserve punishment regardless of growth. Then I'll wait, Rose said simply. That's years potentially. Years of your life waiting for a man who kidnapped you. Years of my life choosing to support someone I love who's trying to be better. Rose moved closer, taking his face in her hands. I'm not naive, Cleto. I know what you did. I know the violence in your past. But I also know the man you're becoming. And if that man has to serve time to pay his debt, then I'll be there when he gets out. Cleto's eyes closed, his hands covering hers. I don't deserve you. Probably not. But you're stuck with me anyway. They spent the next week preparing for trial, gathering evidence, coordinating testimony. Rose divided her time between the safe house in Queens, where her mother was continuing to improve, the experimental treatment working beyond anyone's expectations. You look different, Grace said one afternoon, studying Rose with a mother's knowing eyes. Older, harder, but also lighter somehow, like you figured something out. I did, Rose said. I figured out that people are complicated, that love doesn't always make sense, that sometimes the worst things lead to the best outcomes in ways no one could predict. Grace took her daughter's hand. You're talking about him, the man who took you. He told you? Rose was surprised. She'd been carefully vague about her absence, claiming the private research position Cleto had fabricated as cover. Agent Moreno told me, wanted to make sure I understood what happened, that I knew my daughter had been kidnapped. Grace's voice was steady, but her eyes were fierce. I should hate him, want him dead. But you're alive, I'm alive. And you're choosing to defend him. I am. Then he must be worth defending. Grace squeezed Rose's hand. I trust your judgment, baby. If you see something good in him worth saving, then I believe you. Just be careful. Love shouldn't cost you everything. It won't, Rose promised. I'm choosing me too. My degree, my career, my life. He's part of it now, but not all of it. That's the difference. The trial took 3 months. Rose testified, her voice steady as she described her kidnapping, her captivity, the gradual shift from fear to understanding to something deeper. The defense attorney tried to make her seem like a victim unable to see her own trauma, but Rose refused the narrative. I know what happened to me, she said from the witness stand. I was kidnapped, held prisoner, threatened. Those are facts. But it's also a fact that Cleto Farina chose to help Rosa Castellano when he could have used her. Chose to cooperate with authorities when he could have run. Chose redemption over revenge. Both things are true, and I'm choosing to acknowledge all of it. Rosa's testimony was devastating. Years of abuse detailed in clinical language that couldn't hide the horror of it. Medical records, photos, the evidence Cleto had gathered presented in stark detail. Vincent Castellano sat through it all with cold disdain, But Rose saw cracks in his composure when his daughter met his eyes and refused to look away. "You don't control me anymore," Rosa said simply. "I'm free, and you're going to prison for what you did." The verdicts came down in late spring. Vincent Castellano found guilty on all counts, sentenced to life in prison without parole. Cleto Farina accepted a plea deal. 2 years suspended sentence, 500 hours of community service, full restitution paid to Rose and Rosa both, and permanent supervision by federal authorities for any business dealings. It was mercy. It was justice. It was compromise. It was the best they could have hoped for. 2 years later, Rose stood in the Metropolitan Museum of Art staring at a Caravaggio and thinking about how light and darkness create each other, and how that's true of people too. The gallery hummed with opening night energy. Champagne glasses clinking, heels clicking against marble, the low murmur of art collectors and academics pretending their interest was purely intellectual rather than financial. Rose had learned to navigate these spaces, had earned her place among them through genuine expertise rather than the connections that had initially opened doors. The plaque beside the Caravaggio read, "Acquired by Farina Import Company, authenticated by Rose Jones, art historian." Her name, her work, her legitimacy built partially on foundations laid during captivity, which made it complicated in ways she'd stopped trying to explain to people who insisted on simple narratives. "Baby, you did this." Grace's voice came from behind her, warm with maternal pride. Rose turned to find her mother approaching, elegant in a deep purple dress that complemented her brown skin. Skin that glowed with health impossible 2 years ago. The cancer was in remission. The experimental treatment Cleto had funded had saved her life. Complex didn't begin to cover it. "Mom." Rose embraced her, breathing in the familiar scent of cocoa butter and strength. "I'm so glad you came. Wouldn't miss it. My daughter, the art historian, with her name on a museum plaque." Grace pulled back, studied Rose's face with eyes that saw too much. "I'm proud of you. You know that?" "I know." Rose's throat tightened. "Mom, about how the treatment got funded. Agent Moreno told me everything during the trial." Grace's voice was matter-of-fact. "The man who kidnapped you saved my life. Both things are true." Rose's hands trembled slightly around her champagne glass. "Are you angry that I didn't tell you?" "I'm grateful you're alive. That I'm alive." Grace squeezed Rose's shoulder. "The rest is complicated, but alive is a good foundation to build on." Rose felt him before she saw him. Some instinct developed during those weeks of captivity, when awareness of Cleto's presence had meant survival, then something else entirely. She turned, found him in the gallery doorway, and her breath caught despite 2 years of distance. He looked different. No longer the predator in an expensive suit who'd stood beneath a crystal chandelier and declared her his prisoner. Just a man in a well-tailored navy blazer and dark jeans, hair slightly disheveled like he'd been running his fingers through it. 2 years of community service, therapy, and building a legitimate business had aged him, softened the edges without diminishing the intensity that still made her pulse quicken. Their eyes met across the gallery. That electric connection, the one that had terrified her in the library, in the study, in every charged moment of their captivity, still thrummed between them like a live wire. Cleto approached slowly, respectfully, giving her space in a way he'd learned to do. Grace noticed him, stiffened slightly, but didn't move away. "Congratulations," he said quietly, his accent still carrying that slight Italian lilt that wrapped around English words like silk. "The authentication work is brilliant. I had a good teacher." Rose kept her voice steady despite the way her heart hammered. "You taught me provenance research. I taught you to spot forgeries. You taught yourself the rest." A pause, weighted with everything unsaid. "I didn't know if you'd want me here." "You were invited." Rose glanced at her mother, who was watching the exchange with careful neutrality. "Mom, this is—" "I know who he is." Grace's voice carried the steel that had gotten her through 3 jobs and stage 4 cancer. She extended her hand. "Mr. Farina." Cleto took it carefully, like handling something precious that might shatter. "Mrs. Jones, I owe you an apology." "You owe me nothing." Grace's grip was firm. "You saved my life. You also kidnapped my daughter. Both are true. The question is what you do now." I intend to spend the rest of my life being worthy of her choice to forgive me. Cleto's eyes never left Grace's face. If she makes that choice, good. Grace released his hand. Because if you hurt her again, cancer survivor or not, I will end you. Understood, ma'am. Grace nodded once, then moved away to examine another piece, leaving Rose and Cleto alone in the space between two paintings. One depicting divine calling, the other showing Judas's betrayal with a kiss. Walk with me, Cleto asked. Rose nodded, falling into step beside him as they moved through the gallery. Close enough to feel his presence, far enough to maintain the careful distance they'd kept since the trial. I didn't know if you'd come, Rose said quietly. You invited me. I keep my promises. Remember? She did. That had been the one constant. Cleto's word, given and kept, even when keeping it cost him everything. They stopped before a Titian, all crimson and shadow. Rose studied the brushwork, the way color conveyed emotion, and found words easier when she wasn't looking at him directly. I testified against you, told them everything. The kidnapping, the captivity, all of it. I know. His voice was steady. You told the truth. I respected that. Still do. But I also testified about your cooperation. About choosing to help Rosa. About changing. Also truth. You see complexity. It's a rare gift. Or curse. Rose turned to face him finally, meeting those dark eyes that had haunted her dreams for 2 years. Would have been easier to just hate you. Much easier. The corner of his mouth lifted. Not quite a smile, but close. But we don't do easy, apparently. No, we don't. Rose took a breath, steadied herself. Tell me about the business, the real version, not the press release. Cleto's expression shifted to something more professional, though the intensity never fully left. Farina Import Company is fully legitimate now. We partner with museums, galleries, private collectors. Every acquisition vetted, every piece authenticated, every transaction documented. Rosa actually works for me now, helping screen clients, ensuring no criminal connections. Rosa works for you? Rose couldn't hide her surprise. She understands what it means to build something clean from a dirty foundation. Cleto's voice softened. Like us. If there is an us. There's no us, Cleto. Rose forced the words out, even though saying them felt like tearing something vital. We worked together on this acquisition, but you kidnapped me. That happened. I can't just forget it happened. I don't want you to forget. He moved closer, careful, controlled. I want you to remember, and still choose me anyway. Not despite what I did, but knowing all of it. That's asking a lot. I know, but I'm asking anyway. His voice dropped lower, intimate despite the gallery full of people around them. 2 years I've waited, built legitimate business, paid my debt to society, gone to therapy, made amends where I could, not to earn you, can't earn a person, but to deserve a chance to try. Try what? Everything. Partnership in business, partnership in life. If you'll have me. Rose looked at the Caravaggio again. Light emerging from darkness, divine calling amid betrayal. She thought of her grandmother Josephine, dancing despite segregation. Her mother Grace, surviving cancer through grit and experimental treatments funded by criminal money that saved her life. Rosa Castellano, escaping years of abuse to build something new. All women who'd built beauty from ashes. Who'd chosen survival, then chosen something more. Agent Marino warned me, Rose said quietly. Said I was letting myself be manipulated, that kidnappers don't change, that this is textbook. She's not wrong to worry. Cleto's honesty was one of the things that had kept Rose circling back to him, despite every logical reason to walk away. Power dynamics were completely imbalanced. I had all control. You had none. Had. Past tense. Yes. His eyes held hers. Now you have degree, career, independence. Your mother's healthy. You could walk away right now and I'd accept it. No threats, no leverage, no manipulation, just acceptance. Rose's heart hammered against her ribs. What if I don't want to walk away? Cleto's breath caught. Subtle. But she'd learned to read him. Then I'd ask what you do want. I want honesty. No games, no power plays, no using my mother's health as leverage ever again. Agreed. What else? I want equal partnership, business and personal. I'm not your employee or your girlfriend or your anything except partner. Yes. The word came out rough. Absolutely yes. And I want you to understand. Rose stepped closer, close enough to see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, close enough to smell cedar and something darker. I'm choosing this, not because I have to, not because I'm confused or traumatized or suffering from Stockholm Syndrome, but because I see who you became, and I want to build something with that person. This time Rose kissed him first. In a Metropolitan Museum gallery, surrounded by Renaissance masterpieces and tourists who had no idea they were witnessing something rare, the moment when darkness and light chose each other freely. Finally, when they broke apart, both breathing harder, Rose saw tears in Cleto's eyes. Wrong girl, he whispered against her lips. But exactly the right woman. Terrible man. She smiled despite the tears on her own cheeks. But maybe the right partner. They walked through the gallery together after that, discussing the upcoming Titian acquisition that needed authentication, talking like business partners while their hands intertwined, while something between them shifted from possibility to reality. Rosa found them near the exit, elegant in black, her face no longer bearing the haunted look from photographs. She'd built herself new, strong, purposeful. Museum opening success? Rosa asked, her smile genuine. I think so, Rose said. Rosa, you remember. We've met, under different circumstances. Rosa's eyes flicked between them. Dinner tonight? I want to hear about the Titian project. I'll cook, Cleto offered. Only if you promise no Italian Mafia movies on TV, Rose said, and all three laughed. Dark humor of people who'd survived darkness and chose connection instead. Grace approached as they prepared to leave. Mr. Farina. Mrs. Jones. My daughter loves you. Grace's voice was matter-of-fact. I'm choosing to trust her judgment. But if you hurt her again, you'll end me, I remember. Cleto's voice carried respect. I won't give you reason. See that you don't. Grace turned to Rose. He'll do. Complicated, but most things worth having are. Later, alone briefly while Cleto retrieved their coats, Rose stood before the Caravaggio one final time. Agent Moreno appeared beside her, sharp-eyed as ever. Miss Jones, congratulations on the museum position. Agent Moreno, thank you. I still think you're making a mistake, with Farina. Rose met her gaze steadily. Maybe. But it's my mistake to make. That's what freedom means. Choosing for myself, even if others disagree. Fair enough. Moreno's expression softened fractionally. Just know, if he ever hurts you, I'll put him away myself. I believe you, Rose said. But I don't think you'll need to. 1 year later, Rose and Cleto sat in the Farina Import Company office, planning the annual charity gala. The foundation they'd created funded legal aid for wrongfully convicted and provided resources for domestic violence survivors, using their resources to help others escape the violence they both knew too intimately. Rosa ran the foundation. Grace sat on the board of directors. Cleto's former men worked legitimate security and import logistics. Even Enzo had accepted a plea deal, worked elsewhere now, still hostile but contained. Wedding rings glinted on both Rose and Cleto's hands. Simple bands, chosen together, symbol of something built from ruins. You know people will always question this, Rose said, reviewing grant applications. Us. Let them. Cleto looked up from financial reports. We know the truth, which is that redemption is possible, that people can choose better, that love can emerge from darkness if we're brave enough to build it. Rose stood, moved around the desk, settled into his lap with the ease of long familiarity. I was the wrong girl. You were exactly the right woman. His arms wrapped around her waist, solid and warm. For me. For this. For building something beautiful from the most broken beginning. She kissed him softly, tasting coffee and promise and the complicated truth that some love stories defied easy categorization. That kidnapping was wrong and his change was real. That trauma was valid and healing was possible. That two truths could exist simultaneously. I love you, she whispered against his lips. I love you too. His forehead pressed to hers. Every day I'll work to deserve that. You already do. They stayed like that for a long moment, Two people who'd found each other in the worst possible way and chose each other anyway, freely, finally, building something new from ashes. Outside, New York hummed with its usual chaos. Beautiful and brutal, where dreams and nightmares occupied the same crowded streets. Inside, Rose and Cleto reviewed grant applications and planned fundraising strategies and built beauty from the ruins of their violent beginning. Because that's what redemption looked like. Not erasing the past, but transforming it. Not forgetting the darkness, but choosing to create light anyway. Rose was the wrong girl, kidnapped by mistake because violent men thought brown women with curls all looked the same. But she became exactly the right woman. For herself. For her choices. For building something beautiful from the most broken beginning. They said you couldn't love your kidnapper. They said it was Stockholm Syndrome, trauma bonding, a dozen clinical terms for feelings that couldn't be real. Maybe they were right. But maybe, sometimes, people were complicated enough that two truths existed simultaneously. He did something unforgivable, and he changed. He harmed her, and he saved her mother. He was the worst thing that happened to her. And choosing him freely, finally, was one of the best decisions she ever made. They didn't have a simple love story. They had a messy, real one. The kind built from ashes and choices and forgiveness given because you wanted to, not because you had to. That love showed you exactly who you'd become, and Rose liked who she'd become. Even if it started in a CVS parking lot, zip-tied and hooded, in all the wrong ways. Thank you for watching. If this story stayed with you, share it, comment, and subscribe for more. Here, we explore what happens when love and morality collide, when the wrong choices lead to the right endings. Until the next chapter, stay curious, stay haunted, and never stop looking for beauty in the dark.